welcome to another segment of Lori Says, the video that helps you think on ways to get results. And Lori says today that Kurt Francom is an amazing podcaster, an expert on the field, and he's been podcasting for 5 years. He's going to tell us all about it today, and I'm so honored to be here in his home state, Utah.
That's right. It's a beautiful place.
Welcome here. So tell us all about, we're going to come with questions, and if you have questions, this is not my only time I'm planning to share with Kurt. We originally were planning to do this as a Facebook Live. As it turns out, today Facebook is just having, what is it having today?
Issues. I mean, it feels like the end of the world when Facebook's not available. But.
Right? And many people are complaining. A friend of mine that runs a marathon all day long is saying no marathon, and so it's incredible. But it's a beautiful day here in Utah. It's snowing as we speak right now. It's just wonderful. So this Texan is having a great time in Utah.
You get the true Utah experience here. So.
With snow. So, Kurt, I want to ask you the first question.
Okay.
Is when did you first consider having your own podcast? What was it that you felt that was your message that you needed to share? How was that process?
So I started the podcast in 2014, and before that it was just a blog, and at least my organization and where I was growing an audience was just a blog. And so I had experience in various jobs doing live presentations and public speaking and that sort of thing. So I always knew I was more comfortable in front of a mic than maybe writing an article. Though I do write and I'm comfortable there, but definitely I was drawn towards that. And podcasting was becoming more of a thing, even though people in 2019 think it's just becoming a thing. But it's been around.
Still fairly new in 2019. However, it was starting also back then. Okay.
So I just thought, well, I don't know. I'm not a sound editor. I don't have any experience there, so I just did some basic research, found a mic to buy, and I use Audacity. I still use it to this day, which is a free software that you can go and download, and
I'm taking notes.
That's right. So Audacity will allow you to just do any audio editing, and it's free. And so I started using that, and I had asked some other podcasters, how do you do this and that, and slowly but surely, it wasn't pretty in the beginning, but with all things that we do, but over time it's become easier, and we've grown. That's really when my audience exploded, I guess. I mean, it really got some traction when I went to the podcast route. So
okay, so lots of things here. So is it very typical for bloggers to turn into podcasters?
I think it's typical for anybody who's trying to grow an online presence or an online brand to go with podcasting. I mean, it seems like everybody anybody who's trying to build a brand online seems to have a podcast in some form, but I'm not everybody, but still waiting for the Lori podcast. But Lori Says podcast is coming, right?
It's coming. That's why I'm like, you will be my first podcaster.
There you go.
Let me see what I can get out of this, and if I get excited too, which I think I am.
Yeah.
So okay, bloggers or anybody with wanting an online presence. So, and then what were you blogging about? What was your message that you wanted?
So, and this is a really important part of podcasting and really anything when you're growing an audience, finding a specific niche and audience that you're talking to. Okay. A lot of people will say, I want a podcast, and so I'm going to just interview just anybody who will talk with me and talk generally about whatever. But to really zero in on what audience am I speaking to and what questions they have that I can answer through a podcast, either just a monologue podcast with myself or interviewing an expert. And so during that time, I was serving in a lay ministry for the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. So as you're aware, and many that when you're called, in the church, there's not paid clergy.
Right.
So they could call a mechanic that's in the area to serve as the bishop for 5 years, and that was my experience. I was a 28-year-old marketing grad, and asked me to preside over a ward.
You were 20?
28.
28, sorry. Okay, I was like, whoa.
20, I would have destroyed things.
And then a bishop is like a pastor, right? Mm-hmm. Or a leader of a congregation.
Yeah,
right?
So I saw that there's this audience of lay leaders in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that they weren't getting too much formal leadership training. And so I thought, well, maybe, I'm not a leadership expert, but maybe I could create a platform to bring those people to interview the experts and talk to them. And so I had a very specific niche, a specific audience that I was focusing on, and that made it very easy to identify questions, concepts, topics that I could create episodes around. So
this is fascinating. So what were those areas you feel like they needed more training?
Yeah, so a bishop, for example, may do a lot of counseling and consulting with addicts. Somebody who's going through an addiction. Right. Well, they don't have any formal training around that, and obviously, the bishop would refer them to a professional counselor if it was really a dire situation, but just to give them some background on how to approach those situations, or how to public speak. They're standing at the lecterns in church, and how to do that effectively, or how to motivate people, how to, all sorts of these dynamics of leadership, how to run a meeting, for instance. So all these different concepts gave me a lot to work with as far as topics to create content around.
So as a young bishop, you found that need, that void that wasn't being fulfilled, right? And then you came up with your own content according to what you went through at the same time?
Of it, in the beginning it was, I had certain questions, so I was going out and getting them answered, doing my own research or finding individuals who had professional background in whatever topic it was, and then doing that. And then since then, as the audience grows, then you get people emailing you and say, well, I'm struggling with this or that. And so then you think, okay, I'll see who I can talk to about that subject. That is fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. And then that blog, did it have a good reach? Like just the blog?
Uh-huh.
Did it have a good, nationally, locally, or how far?
Yeah, I guess in 2014 when the podcast started, it had a decent reach. I'm trying to think what the numbers were even back then. Maybe 10,000 people a month that were visiting the site.
Is that a good start for a podcaster?
Yeah, but really, they're a podcast, and I consult with different people who are trying to start a podcast, and a lot of them have a zero audience, right? And so there's various things you can do to stimulate an audience to listen to your podcast. But the number one thing that I always tell people, the best way to grow an audience with a podcast is to have really, really good content. That most of the time when I ask people, how did they hear about my podcast? It's, oh, well, a friend told me, or this person recommended it to me. So if you create content that is so good or answers that question that a lot of people are struggling with, they're more likely to recommend it to somebody else, word of mouth, that way. So
that's the content which should be relatable, relevant, right, to people's needs, and especially on your field or the niche you want to reach.
Yep.
Which podcast inspired you, if any? Were you listening to a podcast already when you thought, hey, I can do this too, or?
Yeah. I had a handful of podcasts I listened to. I'm trying to think, which I listen to a lot of, marketing podcasts or just general leadership. There's a ton of leadership podcasts out there. And I was just, but I just saw that nobody was talking about those things that I want to talk about, and I knew that I was comfortable in front of a mic, so I could jump in and do it. But I've loved that medium of content. I'm the person that I'm out mowing my lawn or doing the dishes with earbuds in, right. And that's my classroom. And I've learned so much, or had so much inspiration through just listening to podcasts. Think, oh man, I've never thought of that. I'm going to try and implement that principle in my own life.
That's awesome. So you are a good example of being teachable, wanting to learn from that same resource or platform, and then you're kind of paying it forward. Another question I have, and then I was going to collect questions from Facebook a few minutes before, and then it didn't work. So I have some questions myself, and again, if you have more questions, post them and email me or whatever during this YouTube video, and we'll get back to him. But I have, what has been your most difficult guest and or topic of discussion during a podcast? You're like, that was awkward, I don't know what happened there, or so any either guest or topic.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes I'll do an interview and it just I didn't really enjoy it that much. Not that I was bored, but it just didn't resonate with me as much, or I thought it would go in a different direction. And it's funny, sometimes I just push myself to publish it anyways, and then it seems like those are the episodes that I always get 3 or 4 emails about. Wow, that was the best episode yet. And I'm like, okay, so I always try and keep in mind that though I may not like it, or it's a topic that doesn't resonate with me, there may be people out there that it resonates with, and so as long as it's not a complete disaster. There's been a few where we just we were talking past each other. I wasn't getting the concept they were presenting, and because I'll interview a lot of just people that aren't used to being interviewed, right? A lot of podcasts will find authors or speakers or professionals that are used to being interviewed, but I try and find the common man that's in the common situations that lay leaders are in our church and talk about their experience. So sometimes they're nervous, they're not used to being interviewed, and then they're so nervous it just doesn't turn out well. But it's really, out of the 300 plus episodes, there's only been maybe one or two that just, I've told them, this didn't work for some reason, so we'll...
And you don't...
And I just didn't publish it.
Oh, wow.
Because, that goes back to if it's not content that is valuable, like your audience will begin to distrust you because you're not consistent with the quality.
So
content.
that's a hard decision. How did the person take it?
They were fine. They were very
They
nice
realized.
Yeah, well, and I just said, and it could have been my fault. I don't. Maybe I wasn't as prepared, but it rarely happens to me. And that's why I always try and push myself to prepare for that interview. So if I'm interviewing an author, I've most likely read their entire book, and I've thought about the principles they're presenting, and then I can bring to them certain questions that are going to end up as a better quality interview. But as long as you do your best to prepare, and it's not like immense preparation, I may spend a half hour for an hour-long interview, but just thinking through, what are the principles, concepts we can touch on, and then you avoid that awkwardness that can sometimes sneak up on you. So.
Right. That's great advice. So as a podcaster and interviewer, you have a responsibility to make it a great experience, getting your feet wet, getting to know the person's interests and message. So from being a bishop and starting it that way, specifically for that niche, has it evolved? Has it evolved through the years?
The podcast itself?
Yes, right. the emphasis, the focus.
Yeah, I think it's evolved. I've just figured out, obviously I've become a better interviewer. That just happens with practice. The more you do, and then I just have been aware of what concepts are resonating more. For instance, I'll do an interview about members of the LGBT community in the church.
That's a big topic now.
And it's a tricky topic, and a lot of leaders in the church who, again, they may be a painter Monday through Friday, and then they have to have these difficult conversations or interact, and they don't know what to do, so therefore they may just avoid the situation altogether, and that's not helpful either. So I just try and focus on... what was your original question? I lost it.
So how has it evolved?
Oh, evolved, right. So then I've seen that there are certain topics that I've spent more time with that I never would have thought to spend time with before, because I see what the audience is responding to, and then more questions come from them around those specific topics. And then it's evolved, over time, for someone starting a podcast, to consider what certain segments they can have. And what I mean by that is I have a segment I do on the podcast called How I Lead, where I interview everyday people about how they have approached their lay leadership responsibility. And then I'll do a concept called What I Wish I Knew. And so I'll do what I wish I knew before I was a bishop, or what I wish I knew before I put on a primary program, or whatever it is. And then I take 5-minute recordings of people and put them together. So
cool.
It kind of mixes it up and allows the audience to learn from different types of podcasts, where there are some podcasts where it's just like interview after interview after interview, which mine sometimes get into that mode, but it's nice to switch it up to, instead of getting one person's perspective in one podcast, you can get 10, 15, 20 people's perspectives and put them in one podcast. So you just play around with, as far as the evolution of the podcast, I just try different things, and some things have stuck and others haven't, so.
And that way, it's been so powerful, to get the perspective of different peoples. So, people, another question is the reach now. The reach, as it's evolved, what's been the most impactful thing? Oh my goodness, see, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, because it changed somebody's life, once you hear people's feedback. So have you had any impactful stories of what people got from your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every week I'll get a handful of emails from people saying, wow, I tried this idea from the guy that you interviewed about this topic, and it's completely changed how we are as an organization. And just people feeling like, I just look forward to the interesting discussions you have, or I look forward to the fact that you're not afraid to shy away from the difficult topics.
Good.
And so, yeah, I mean, the reach has been incredible. I mean, I think last month we had close to 65,000 downloads, in 1 month. So that's, wow. I mean, to me, I'm down in my basement on a microphone, but I'm talking to an arena of people, and so it's just so cool that we can have these discussions and we don't have to rent out the arena or, get the investment to put on a big conference. We can just share on a smaller scale, but it reaches at a larger scale.
So as the life coach in me is going to look at the camera now and say, look what one individual has been able to accomplish because he went ahead and follow the calling, follow that, I don't know, nagging little voice that he got at some point, and he wanted to make a difference. Yeah. So it's not about us, or it's not about him, and it's about him. It's not about him because he wants to impact so many people, and he's doing it, but it's about him, or Kurt Francom, about you, about me, stepping out of our comfort zones to really make a difference and to impact lives. And not only him, but the people he interviews, have this opportunity to be a voice and be answers to other people out there waiting for answers that he might not have, but because he's doing this, somebody else is giving us answers through him. So it's just beautiful, and I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, you just have to start somewhere. I mean, I could have never imagined the reach and impact that we're having on, obviously a topic and community that means so much to me, and so, man, sometimes I pinch myself that I'm the guy that gets to interview these people and ask these questions and then share it with the world,
That's awesome.
And really, there's it doesn't, we can throw around numbers, but man, imagine if you could. It's sort of interesting how our mind works. Is if we're invited to a conference and let's say 100 people show up at the conference, we're asked to speak on the stage. I mean, we're going to think, wow, that was cool. We're not going to regret that decision. Right. But sometimes people, they hear these, tens of thousands of downloads, and then they look at theirs and, I only had 200 people download mine. Well, I mean, you could fill a good sized conference room with 200 That's people, true. And so. Find your audience and speak to them and serve them. Find the topics that they want to talk about, and that's the most fulfilling, that you're helping people
that want what you have to offer, right? That's what Tim Ferriss calls the tribe.
Yeah,
you need to find your tribe or your people. Another question that I have is, because you say, and which is rare, right, that you feel comfortable with the microphone.
Yeah, sure.
That's not very common. That's great. That was your gift. That's your strength. But for people that shy away from that's not their forte, right? What would you recommend for them to do, or what's been an experience that somebody else has overcoming that? Yeah,
I mean, some people, especially starting a podcast, they'll record some things and they'll listen to it and they'll be just so embarrassed, like, I can't publish that. When in reality, it doesn't sound that bad. And so, to me, I always push people just get your 10 episodes out there, and you can always go back and delete them if you want, but just the practice of doing it, I mean, that's the only way to get through this. There's not like a special course you can take or a pill you can take that's going to make you more comfortable. It's just being in front of it, front of the mic, and trying again and again. And obviously, I think some people have a natural knack for it, other people don't, but it's definitely a skill that can be learned. So
absolutely, and with experience. I have my clients now, I help them in a personal level and in a professional level. They're doing videos on Facebook, and then we watch them together, and then I'm like, okay, this could have been different this way, and then I have them record them in my office. Let's pretend you're on that setting again. What would you have said with everything we've discussed? And it makes a big difference in that. You want me to do it here? And I'm like, yes. And when they do it there with me, they have that pressure happening, and then when they go out in the field, it's so wonderful that because they've done it with me in the office, they have felt that pressure already, and they've gone through the experience, and then they do it better. And I saw in one of your articles that how you said practice, and even though you say and you don't like your own voice, it doesn't matter. I mean, the more you do it, I promise you, because in his experience, he's gone through this, and then in my experience, it's the same. Like, I didn't like listening to me or watch myself, but it grows on you, and you say, it doesn't matter how, because it's not about me, right? It's about the lives that I can impact and change, right?
Yeah, because I see so many people,
self-conscious.
They're self-conscious. They hear the ums and ahs, after they listen to it, they think, oh, well, I'm going to go through and edit all of those. And then, you may record an hour interview, and then it's a 3-hour edit process, and then it becomes this huge time sucker. And then to do that again and again, they just get exhausted, and then they quit.
They get discouraged.
And so I just, if you have a hard time listening to yourself, then don't listen to it. Just publish it, right? But I see too many people just get obsessed with over editing, trying to polish it, make it sound less real, and then you get a less real of a podcast, which people don't enjoy, and it takes so much time that you end up just being exhausted and quitting. So
the more authentic, the more free-spirited it is. That's right. It's better. It's good. It's and if you said it in the article, if the content is valuable, people are going to overlook those imperfections.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, what would you have regret if you would have said, "No, I'm not going to do this"?
What would I have regretted? I mean, I guess it's hard to. I probably wouldn't know the impact it would have, but
because you've done it, right?
Yeah.
You've done it, but then looking back, and if you would have thought. Because that's where a lot of people are, right? I need to delay this until I have the perfect setting, the perfect equipment, the perfect presentation skills. What would you have regret if you wouldn't have done it?
I would have regretted not having an audience to speak to, because the people I get to interact with, and I just feel like I'm living a dream that I get to talk to interesting people for a living and record and create content that's truly helping people. And I would have just missed that there is this audience out there that I would have never discovered, that would have never been able to contribute to, and who knows the impact they're having in their own worlds and their own circle of influences. And so, it's just, there's all sorts of things to regret. And I'm glad, and I'm sure I've made some mistakes that I'm missing out on some things I could have done. It's not like I've never had a weak moment or a hesitation, but yeah, there's an audience out there that needs your perspective and understanding what you could bring to them to help them succeed.
That's fantastic. So heeding to that calling is important, and you haven't regretted it. I was just thought, okay, what is it that somebody would regret? So impacting lives is regretful because you have your own experience, you have your own perspective, your own contacts, and people that we don't know, right? That need that message on your field that you want to target, right? And educate people on, and inspire and motivate people about, right?
Yep.
Another question is, I know you've written a book, right?
Yep.
What's the name of the book?
It's called A Culture of Ministering.
Oh, okay. So more on the same.
It's for that specific audience. So you're, if you're not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ, you probably will not find it at all interesting.
Oh, okay.
But it's not for them. It's for
any
leaders in the church that because we have a ministering program where people go out and try and minister to those other people in the area, but it's hard to sometimes motivate people to go visit and go watch over people, and so I tackle that issue of how to do that effectively so that you see progress,
just like Christ did, right?
Yeah.
Watching over each other. So that's awesome. So how long ago did you publish the book?
So the first reason I wrote the book was to capture the audience. So a big part of it's one thing to have a podcast and have people listening, but how do you really engage that community and so one way I did that was to write the book and then offer it for free for people that signed up for the email list, so that now I have an email list of a good portion of my audience that I can then speak to directly, and I'm not dependent on their podcasting app or Facebook or social media to reach that audience. So I wrote it mainly as a giveaway, and now we have some other giveaways. But yeah, it's on Amazon.
Oh, it's more of an ebook. Is it an ebook?
It was an ebook, but now it's on Amazon. Yeah, I mean you can order a physical book.
And how long ago? Like, is it?
It's been probably a year since that was available.
Did the podcast content helped you?
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean everything, anecdotes and things that I write in there usually came from an interview or a personal application from a principal.
Another perk of having a podcast. You can become a best-selling author.
That's right. Well, it's not to that level, but again, that wasn't the main purpose. Yeah, but maybe someday. So.
That's awesome. That's awesome. One of my questions also is, what is your next challenge or thing that makes you like nervous? Like, oh, no, I can't do that. Or like, yes, that will be my next challenge that I want to tackle, other than a podcast and a book.
Yeah. Well, so now I've been focusing on virtual summits, so creating an online conference where leaders can come to around a specific topic and learn about. So we did a virtual summit called Motivating Saints, all about motivation, because that was the number one response we got from the audience is, I don't know how to motivate people. I tell them to do something as their leader, and they still don't do it. So how do I motivate people? So we did a whole online conference of recorded video interviews around that topic, and then we did one called Teaching Saints, about how to teach in the church, because there's a lot of teaching that goes on. And then in a couple of weeks we released Questioning Saints, which is all about individuals who wrestle with doubt and question their faith, and how a leader can help that person out through that difficult time. And so these are all online conferences based around certain topics or questions that the audience has had. And now I'm slowly building this library of virtual summits that people can refer to maybe they are frustrated with motivating people. Well, now here's 30 hours of interviews that you can dive into and do that. And so this year, the Questioning Saints one will be one of 4 that we'll do in 2019 of all these online conferences. And this is sort of the next thing. I've done a few, a little more comfortable, but man, I'm still like, I'm thinking now, like that virtual summit comes out in 2 weeks, and I don't, I hope I'm ready, but it's definitely challenging. And
so is it a live event or more recording?
They're all recorded, and then we release we make each session available for 24 hours. Okay. So it's got a conference feel, as if you went to a conference. Obviously you can't, you would just be there to view it, and you couldn't view it again. Obviously we record it for those who want to access it later, but we try and make it a conference feel online.
Okay, so it's a different feel of the format than a podcast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there's video involved, and
I see.
But and then there's the audio is available, but we try and a lot of the presenters will use slides and visuals and things, so that's an option there.
Awesome. We have David from Texas asking some questions. He wants to know if podcasting is expensive.
It's really not. I mean, some people, they get caught up in like the equipment, and you can find all sorts of blogs and forums online that'll give you a list of equipment you need. But really, you can podcast with just your phone, right? There's an app that you can get started with called Anchor, and basically it's a free podcasting service. So you download the app and you hit record, and you can interview somebody just with your phone. And the quality, I mean, phones do pretty good quality sound. And that's free. So you could literally have a podcast just for the cost of having a phone. But it seems like everybody has a phone,
right?
But I mean, there's sort of that next step of equipment of basic microphones and recorders. But like I said, I use Audacity. I just plug there's a mic. I think it's a $70 mic on Amazon. I can send you the link if you want. I've used that mic from the beginning. And some podcasters, they like to really geek over like the tech, and I got this mic and it's $700 and it's this and that and the other, and I don't get it. I don't geek out over that stuff. To me, if you can understand it, great. If it's obvious, people let you know if they can't understand you, but it doesn't take much to have a basic mic. You can plug in your computer, use Audacity to record, and away you go. And it gets a little bit tricky when you do things remotely. Maybe you can't take your equipment there, but I use a Zoom recorder that I can, it's the size of a brick, and I plug a couple mics into it, and I do podcasts from anywhere. So, so you could, as far as, if I would start my podcast over again and I wanted to use the equipment I use, I could easily under, $600 get the equipment I need and be off and running.
If you want to get fancy and expensive and geeky about it.
But really, if people just want to dabble, just start with the Anchor app and try it out until you get some feedback, or you may, use Patreon to get some money, people paying you for the service, and then you've got maybe $100 a month at some point, and then you can go slowly, level up through the... When
you say Patreon, is that like a sponsor or
so Patreon is a service. It's almost like a ongoing Kickstarter where you can say, go to my Patreon account and give me $1 a month or give me $5 a month that goes towards the production of this what I'm doing. So you may have people that really like what you're doing and want to hear more and more podcast episodes, and they'll think, I'll give you $5 a month if you can keep going, if that will sustain you. And there's people, you go on there and see some people tens of thousands of dollars a month from people just giving through Patreon.
That's excellent.
Or it's if it was $500 a month, that you could do a lot with that, and reinvesting it and leveling up all your gear and things like that. So there's a lot you can do.
He definitely knows what he's talking about. This is awesome. So with that, I think it rolls over to the next question. David asked from Texas, the equipment that you start, is it different from what you have now?
It's really not. Like I said, I still use that $70 mic that I bought off Amazon. I think I bought another one just because it works. And if it works, great. Other than that, I don't. Pretty much the same equipment. And like I said, I still use Audacity, which is a free software.
Cool.
So yeah, to me, there's probably more I could do.
Can't be
but
free.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And then, do you do? Is it a one-man show? Like, is it a one-man thing? Like, or do you?
Yeah, in the beginning, it was just me. I would record and then I go back and edit, and I hate editing. It's the worst. But some people, they love editing, right? So I actually found somebody on Upwork, which
another resource.
Another resource. Basically, you can hire anybody from around the world to do just about anything. Right. So if you don't like bookkeeping, you can find somebody to do bookkeeping. Or if you don't like marketing or designing, you can find that. Or if you don't like to edit audio, you can find an audio editor on there. And so that's what I did. I've had the guy I use is in the Philippines, and I've had him for 3+ years, and he does great.
And how do you do that? Like, do you tell him what at the beginning? Do you navigate them through what is it that you want? What is it that you don't want? Or educate them?
Well, I don't do... I try and keep my podcast real. And so it's not overproduced. There are, you hear NPR podcasts that are overproduced.
Like we were saying earlier, right?
Yeah. But which is fine. There's a place for that. But I just sit down with someone, hit record, and maybe I'll use my place, or I'll say something I didn't like. But for the most part, I just record, and then the editor takes that and puts the intro music on with my intro, and maybe a special we have going on or whatever it is, and then he sends it back to me, and then I upload it to the server, and it gets published. So
very good.
Saves me hours of time.
Upwork is one of the many options out there, right, where people can find...
Yeah, there's freelancer.com.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm sure there's a few more, but those are the two big ones. So
very good. Great information here. So useful. And do you record many podcasts in advance?
Yes, I do. So there's this concept of batching that is really powerful for when you're doing an online business or a content creator. That you may I may do 3 or 4 episodes, record 3 or 4 episodes in a week, or interview 3 or 4 people, and then the next month I've got enough audio to get me through the next month. So I'll get like 8 weeks ahead, and then I'll take a couple months off from recording and focus on the summits or other things I'm doing. But yeah, it's nice to get ahead, and I don't want to get too ahead where people are listening in July to my wishing them Merry Christmas or something, you know.
Right.
So I try and keep it not too far ahead, but it's nice to step away and take a break from just the constant recording.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. That's a good question, David. And then, where do you find the inspirational topics? Was another question.
Yeah, I think that just comes to either the audience will send in an email and say, I'd love to hear more about this, or I see what topics are resonating with, what are getting the most downloads and most shares, or I'll just run into someone will make an introduction to somebody who's got a fascinating story, and I'm just excited to hear it, let alone record it. So I just now I'm to the point where I don't have to like go and chase down interviews. People generally send me recommendations and introduce me to people, which is really nice because it makes it a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
So that's generally how I find the topics.
Inspirational topics.
That's right.
And I think that's all of David's questions. And what would be your last say? Like, what would you encourage to wrap it up? Like, what would you tell people out there on the edge of doing something meaningful, impactful, or a podcast or anything else in their lives?
I guess I would give a challenge. If there's someone out there that wants to start a podcast, or they've been thinking about it, I'd really love to do a podcast about this topic, or nobody's doing it, or I would really enjoy it. I challenge you to record your first episode today, and you could get the Anchor app, you hit record, and you start talking, and you publish it. If you can get that habit going, you will, before you know it, be at 300 episodes and be good. So I challenge you to do today, and nobody will probably hear it for a long time, but that's okay. It'll get an audience, and so publish, get your content out there. Your audience is definitely waiting. So.
When there's a challenge, there's change that happens, right?
Yeah.
Like working out and things like that.
Yeah.
So take that challenge. That will be great. I will second that challenge too, and just do it. Like we know the name brand that says just do it, and make it happen. It will be great. It will change people's lives, and it will change your life too. So. Yep. This is awesome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Thanks for being in my segment. Thanks for having me here. Yeah. And see you next time.
All right.
Bye.